And thrilled to have you here at our Ambassador Circle. It's really the first time in a long time that we've got a representative from Latin America here. The relationship between Japan and Peru is obviously a very deep and very good one. And it's always good to know that, now the world's best restaurant, is Central in Lima, which one of the offsprings a couple of years ago opened here in Tokyo. So we can share your wonderful cuisine and your wonderful creativity. There's a lot going on in the world, and it's very easy to get confused. One of the best things to do probably is to go on a 3 or 4 week retreat somewhere to do a complete detox and come back after 4 weeks to see whether anything fundamental actually has changed. But, focusing a little bit on the deep relationship between your country, Ambassador, Peru, and Japan, and a little bit of context of the relationship, between Japan and Peru, and broadening out a little bit into Japan and Latin America. Because I think the one thing that is clear as America becomes more and more focused on itself, that the rest of us, including Japan, are going to have to work harder to make new friends and to establish more credible relationships with other continents, with other blocs, and with other countries. So without further ado, Ambassador, thank you so much, and very much looking forward to your remarks.
Good morning. Thank you, Jesper. Thank you for your kind invitation to come to speak to this esteemed forum. I am excited to explore the evolving relationship between Japan and Latin America and how it could shape in the next decade. This partnership is spanned over 150 years. I can tell you that there are two main cornerstones about these relations between my region and Japan. One is the establishment of the diplomatic relations. It was Peru, the first country that signed an agreement with Japan in 1873. This treaty of peace, friendship, trade, and navigation was followed 15 years later by Mexico, 23 years later by Brazil, and by the end of the 19th century by Argentina and Chile. The other cornerstone that I want to mention is the wave of Japanese migration that crossed the Pacific Ocean and built a new life in Latin America. The main recipients of this migration, it was Peru and Brazil. Nowadays, Brazil has a Nikkei community of more than or close to 2 million, United States with 1.5 million, and in Peru, we are having more than 200,000 Nikkei community, and they have played an important role in our society. In the next few minutes, I will explain a little bit about or highlight the world landscape. I will go and speak a little bit about Asia, what's going on over here. I will speak a little bit about Latin America, what has been the policy of Japan towards our region, and I will end up by talking about the Japan and Peru's relations. So I will start by current global landscape. Today, we're facing a very challenging global context where the economic uncertainty, the geopolitical tensions, and the social mobilization intersect and demand a new approach in the international cooperation. Global order is increasingly polarized with two driving engines that drive the dynamics of the global affairs. From one side, we have United States and the other, China. China has set an ambitious and yet calculated annual growth target of 5% of their GDP, focusing mainly on internal development and also in global competitiveness. On the other hand, we have a United States which is entrenched in a tariff war, steadily reshaping the paradigm of trade, international trade, and economic relations. This strategic decision made by these two powers will have an effect in the global order, especially in the trade network. For example, the China 5% growth policy signals a commitment of a long-term stability despite the tariff pressure, ensuring his presence in the global supply chain. However, such a deliberate growth reinforces protectionism trend and slow the global economic dynamics. Meanwhile, the United States is raising tariff and is creating uncertainty in the global market, undermined multilateral trade mechanism, and also exacerbate frictions with countries that depend on transparent and rule-based commerce. Having said that, this compounding trend and the persistent geopolitical conflicts weigh heavily on the global economy. Europe, in this case, Ukraine, underscore on how a local crisis can have an effect all over the world. And I give you an example. Before the war in Ukraine, I used to go to a bakery to buy some bread. We used to pay for, in our coin is 1 sol, 5 pieces of bread. When the war started, we only can get 3 pieces of bread and a small size. So anything that goes in the world, it has an impact in other places of the world. And in this case, Peru and many places in the world is being affected. Now, I would like to turn my attention to the Asia, where Japan lies in the heart of a very volatile region. It has many neighbors over here where the tension is palpable. You can feel it. I mean, and this tensions is we can say that there are many reasons why they have tensions. One is the territorial dispute that they have in the sea and the land. Mm-hmm. Also, we have the historical grievance. We can mention the Taiwan situation. And I can mention the great power rivalry. And of course, the North Korea unpredictability. And without mentioning the military provocation that they have, the problems that they have in the sea with the ships, with planes in the air. So all this is a very complex security environment. And I have mentioned, the economic and the political situation or why this is hard is because a country has to think strategically. Over here, we have in this area Southeast Asia, and then we have China, of course, Russia, North Korea, South Korea, and of course, Japan. But in the back, we have Latin American countries. We're connected with the Pacific Ocean, but also we have the advance that we are kind of far from these problems over here. Mm. So let me tell you a little bit about Latin America. Latin America plays a critical role in the global economic, environmental, and geopolitical landscape. There are key things that I can mention about Latin America. One is the food production. In Latin America, we produce around 40% of the world food. Mm. So we play a key role on food security, which is something important for Japan. We have natural resources and environmental sustainability. In Latin America, we have a significant share of the world fresh water, fertile land. Mm. We have biodiversity. We have natural resources and minerals, important minerals that the world needs right now. And also, we cannot, we play a key role in the climate change too. So our region is important. We also have a population of more than 650 million, which gave a possibility for consumers and also a labor market. So that's another important thing. Latin America also plays an important role in the renewable energy leadership. So many countries in Latin America, they have renewable energy matrices. So that also is important. And we also have an area of nuclear weapon-free zone, and we also have a very dynamic diplomacy that we act for peace, we work for peace in the international arena. So all this, what I have mentioned, I think is very important for this region. Now, let me speak a little bit about how Japan has dealt with Latin America. His vision of Japan. In 2014, Prime Minister Abe, he visited 5 different countries in Latin America. He visited Mexico, Trinidad and Tobago, where they meet with all the CARICOM countries. He visited Colombia, Chile, and Brazil. And he introduced his policy for Latin America. It was called Juntos, which means together. And he viewed what is very interesting is that Abe has had a very interesting view of our region. They saw as a reliable partners, and for expanding his diplomatic and economic horizon in our area. Also, he underscored the historical links between our regions and Japan, and also the mutual support that we've been giving to Japan during their difficult times. Also, he links his economic strategy, Abenomics, with this policy of Juntos. So he mainly have 3 points that he worked with Juntos. One is progress together. It was more deal with economic things. And during this period, there was signed many economic partnership agreements with many countries in Latin America. They expand some of the companies to Latin America, and they invest in industries. So the other important principle was the lead together. It was a collaboration on global challenge that they have. He thought that Latin America can be a good partner to deal to this global issue that we have. And then finally, the other main point that he had was inspire together. What it was more dedicated to the Nikkei community and personal exchange between Latin America in general and Japan. In 2024, Prime Minister Kishida also traveled to Latin America, and he unveiled a new policy to our region. The theme of his policy was paving the way to human dignity together with Latin America and the Caribbean. The key pillars of his view are the promotion of international order based on freedom and the rule of law. The other important point that he mentioned was addressing global challenge, related to climate change and environmental issues. The next things that he pointed out was the fostering inclusive prosperity, ensuring that no one is left behind. And the fourth point that he promoted was the people-to-people contact. Of course, it's to enhance more cultural and interpersonal connections between our region and Japan. The Prime Minister emphasized that these goals are shared, but the path to achievement not necessarily has to be the same. Each country will have its own path to achieve this goal. Now, let me explain a little bit about the relations between Peru and Japan. We have historical bond, like I mentioned in 1873, that we established these relations with between Peru and Japan. It's been more than 153 years, and in 2023, we celebrate 153 years. What is important about this relation? Right now, we have these strategic relations with Japan, and that was signed in 2016. And last year, we've been working with the Minister of Foreign Affairs to put this strategic relation that we have with Japan in a perspective of working in the next 10 years. There are this roadmap that we work with Japan has 5 components. One is the political and diplomacy. The other one is the economic. The next one is bilateral collaboration, social and people-to-people contact, and security and defense. I can mention that opportunity for Japan, there are many in Peru, and we're hoping that we can work in that way. And of course, to mention the importance of the Nikkei community in our society. They've been playing many roles, and they've been even in the political area. So we can say that for us, the Nikkei community is important. Now, all this, what I've been mentioned, how can we work? What will be the future of our relation as a region with Japan? What we can do? The question will be, are those 2 policies that I just mentioned from Japan are good enough? Have we a good impact in our region? Can we do something else? What we can do in the next 10 years? I believe that there are 2 things that maybe we can work. One is the political dialogue mechanism between Japan and our region, but a very high level. I will say either the Minister of Foreign Affairs or presidents. We need to have this dialogue to speak about the importance of our region and how we can work together. And the other thing that I think is very important is to have a joint investment fund addressed for infrastructure gap that we have. We have a gap of more than, in Peru, more than $100 billion just in Peru. So those 2 elements, I think, is important for to work with Japan, to have a better impact in our region. We need we need to Japan to go back to Latin America with more intense relation, to have more impact in our region. It's been mentioned that nowadays there is a stronger presence of China or some other countries. But where have you been? That's a question. Why not go back to Peru? Or don't go back to the region? We're hoping that Japan, and they are working, of course, the Minister of Foreign Affairs is working on it. Now, with what is happening with the United States, the tariff that is imposing, of course, we have many questions to answer. How it's going to affect us, how it's going to affect the other part of the world, what we can do, how can we work. But for one thing is sure, that you cannot blame if we work with one country or another if you don't come and also are willing to work with us. So that's a little bit of my thoughts about it, of what's going on. I conclude with Japan. We have to deep our collaboration. We have to size investment opportunity. There are investment opportunity, and then we have to decisively build prosperity across the Pacific. We have to work in this region.
Right.
Thank you.
Great. Your Excellency, thank you very much. This was quite a strong overview. Now, you've been the ambassador here in Japan since 2022.
Yes.
Right. Over your period here, what has been your happiest moment or your most successful moment where you really thought that the relationship between Japan and Peru is moving in the right direction? Because clearly there is, whether it is the Japanese trading companies, whether it is the Japanese food companies, there's a pretty dense relationship, right, between the two countries. But where did you sort of say, okay, into the overall vision here, where did you make the most progress?
Let me tell you, I came in 2022. It was still the COVID, so it was not too much that you can do. But when I came and I started working in the embassy, I look into the future. So I say 2022, we'll study a little bit about Japan. 2023, it was 150 years of diplomatic relations, so we have to concentrate on that. We have the visit of Princess Kako to Peru. So we make different activities in Peru and Japan. So I was trying to make awareness about Peru and Japan's relations. And then we have the 2024, the opportunity of having two important events. One is G20 in Brazil and APEC meeting in Peru. So we work in 2024 to have this strategic relation and put it in the perspective and to work in the next 10 years in different areas. We have identified 61 areas in which we can work with Japan. So, and now in 2025, of course, we have Osaka. We have an opportunity that also for our authorities to come over here, and I hope that we will have a high-level visit over here. We're hoping that my president will come. We're hoping our authorities will come. And this is important because we need more high-level talks. We need to, because that's the only way that we can move further. We can move easier. And that's why we are hoping, and that's why I talk about this high-level dialogue mechanism between presidents and ambassador, Minister of Foreign Affairs. I think it's important. And I think some other countries, of course, they do it with Latin America. Why not Japan? Why not Japan? At the beginning, it can be with few countries, let's say the Pacific Alliance countries or whatever, but whoever wants to come, let them come and speak with Japan. Let's see what we can work in global challenge that we have. So I think that's one thing that the Japanese Minister of Foreign Affairs should think about it.
You mentioned 61 areas.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Which one are you most passionate about?
Probably, well, each one has its own benefits.
Don't be so ambassadorial.
Okay.
What are you most passionate about? I mean, 60 of they're all important.
We have a lot of economic problems in Peru.
Yep.
So why not go and invest I'm very passionate about infrastructure. There are a lot of opportunities in Peru.
Right.
And we need that.
Right.
We need the Japanese technology. We want the Japanese know-how. We want the Japanese that they want to work without corruption.
Yeah.
We want that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there are opportunities there.
So tell me, there has been a big project led by the People's Republic of China, building port facilities.
Yes.
Right? And I think the project is now complete or close to completion?
No, it's complete.
Right?
Yeah.
What is the name of the project?
Chancay.
Chancay
Port, yes.
Okay, and it's a big port. And
It's It's a huge port. It's the biggest port in the South Pacific Ocean.
Right. And what does China get out of it?
Well, you can take the products from, not only from Peru, but from many places or many countries in Latin America, straight from Chancay to Shanghai in a shorter time.
Right.
So this will enhance the commerce between our region and China. Why not bring in ships from Japan to Chancay straight, There are opportunities there. And why we have the China port? Why don't the America or Japan came and also built? I mean, we're very open society. Who wants to come and work? Let's work.
Right.
Because we have too many economic problems to solve. We cannot be so exquisite that we can work with this country or another country.
Right.
So that's it's not only Chancay, but what is around. We're trying to work many facilities around Chancay. So there are opportunities also for the Japanese companies to move there.
I mean, it's very interesting, right? Because, the ability, willingness to take risk. I mean, every country has its own, problems. Of course, from a governance perspective, it's very easy to draw question marks over many of the Latin American, countries. And so it may be more tempting to stay closer to your own backyard, i.e. Asia Pacific here. But, at the same time, and this is what is interesting, is why is it that over the last literally couple of decades, sort of the big infrastructure projects, primarily have been led by the People's Republic of China, right? Did you try and woo the Japanese more? You need to do your Peruvian dance. All the charm and all this wonderful thing. By the way, I was very lucky. The ambassador very kindly invited me to your new embassy.
Okay.
It's a beautiful little complex, absolutely spectacular, and you charmed me very much. First with your food, which was excellent, and then you do have this. Very, very good alcohol.
Pisco sour.
And I always thought it was from Chile.
No.
So the pisco sour. You do know what you're doing in terms of the charm offensive here.
Yeah.
But.
No, that the pisco sour is originated in Peru, and it's a long history. But to make it short, at the beginning, in Peru, when we were a viceroyalty, we started producing wine, and we started competing with Spain. So the king of Spain prohibited us to produce more wine. So instead of producing wine, we decided to start producing brandy, and that's where the pisco comes.
You see, this is where the unintended consequences of Mr. Trump's tariffs. When the government prohibits and makes it difficult, that's when the creativity really starts to get going. So we shall see. I just say DeepSeek as opposed to AI. Anyway, in terms of sort of the people-to-people exchange, right? We hear here in Japan, sort of a lot about the Brazilian, sort of diaspora of Japanese, and a fair amount of sort of back and forth, over history. But you hear much, much less about sort of the Peruvian diaspora. How many Peruvians have come back to Japan? I mean, is this a thing? If you could talk a little bit about that.
In Peru, we have the Peruvians that live over here in Japan are around 45 to 50,000 people.
Yes.
And basically, I will mention Gunma. Mm-hmm. They live in Gunma. They live in Nagoya, closely to industrial parks. So, and they come and they have their this Japanese descendants. So they very much they come over here and they work, and they are very much integrated to the Japanese society. Mm-hmm. What is good about our migration is that we adapt very much to the society where we live. Mm-hmm. We don't come with we have our own culture, but we don't come to impose it, but we most integrate it. And this reflection also, you can see it in the food. When the Spanish came, we accepted their food and we integrate that food and we put our own food products. So we have this exclusive and cuisine, Right. And the same with nowadays, you also see Nikkei cuisine in Peru. Right. So we integrate what we have learned from Japan into our cuisine. Yeah. Yeah. So there is a lot of things that integrate us with Japan.
Yeah. Now, I must say, I was very embarrassed. Kathy and I, we had the good fortune to go to Lima, 6-7 years ago. And, the best tuna I ever had in my life, and I can promise you I eat pretty good tuna here, was actually in Lima. And then, of course, the explanation was very simple. Well, it's caught right off door, right? Because it's right there, so the travel time is much, much shorter here.
Yeah.
So now, your sort of agenda in stimulating greater interest amongst the Japanese business leaders, amongst the Japanese policymakers in Latin America, engaging closer there. What are the sort of 2 or 3 areas where you would like to focus on? And where do you think the Japanese are receptive to Latin America in general, to Peru in particular, and what are some of the pushbacks, what are some of the difficulties that you face to convince the Japanese to engage closer with Peru or with Latin America?
Well, like I mentioned, at one point, Japan was very much present in Latin America. But after 1980, they start moving to Southeast Asia. Mm-hmm. And they left Latin America. And I think it's time for Japan to go back. Mm-hmm. The opportunities, they are there in infrastructure. The opportunities are building schools, building hospitals. There are many, many things. And they are having over here a problem of food security. Mm-hmm. Why not go and invest in that area? Mm-hmm. We have a very big areas where they can go and invest in that.
And what is the pushback that you get? You know, I mean, so there's an opportunity for arbitrage. It makes sense, right? Big food supplier, in particular, lots of minerals, and all of which Japan doesn't have. But what is the pushback that you get from the Japanese?
Like why they don't go down there? I will say that they will need for the government to work with them. Mm-hmm. I think if we can work with the government to tell them to go, they will go. Mm. Because in the case of Peru, there is political noise. But then again, we have a very strong economic framework. Mm. It's not going to change. Mm. They say that Latin America is far. It's not far. I think it's more a mental block. Mm. Mm. Because now you go to the States, it's 9.5 hours, and then you go to Latin America, to Peru, 6 hours more. Mm. Mm. And every time is reducing the time. Mm. So the opportunities are there. And when we are trying to convince the Japanese to go to Peru and I suppose to Latin America is probably they are too busy in this area investing, but then they have problems with they don't have enough people over here to probably to go, and I think there is a language barrier. But I say that there is a huge Nikkei community to work with. Mm. So it's not. I don't think it's a language barrier.
I mean, it's a big question, sort of going forward, because I mean, if you step back, America over the last 70, 80 years provided a lot of public goods to the world. And, was the definite stabilizer, in the global economy, in the global financial system, in the global trading system. Because at the end of the day, enforcing, trade deals and business relations, at the end of the day, the backbone of the American legal power, was very, very important, right, in doing that. Now that this is being withdrawn and you cannot rely on this anymore, unfortunately. Forging new relationships, forging bilateral relationships as a hedge, for your own national survival is going to become much, much more important. So ironically, I think, the role of Latin America, given the richness of its economic endowment and giving the richness of its people endowment, right? I mean, like you point out, it's almost 700 million people, and it's a young population, right? Yes. So that's where maybe Japan needs to rethink and become a little bit more aggressive, sort of in exploring relationship there. What are you doing at Banpaku? Are you having a pavilion? Is there a Peruvian pavilion?
Pavilion right now in Osaka. Yes, we have.
With lots of pisco sour.
I hope so.
This is very important.
Pisco sour and food.
And food, okay.
Yes, we are very much present in this Osaka. I think it's an important event.
Right.
And Peru is doing this effort to be here.
Right.
And we have a middle-sized pavilion, so we're very happy to participate there. And like I say, it's an opportunity also to bring our authorities to come over here.
Right.
Because we need more this high-level contacts.
Right. Is there one country in Latin America that you would point to that actually plays the Japan card very well or relatively better than the other ones?
Of course, you have Mexico and Brazil. They're doing a good job. I think Brazil. Well, it's a huge market too. Brazil, and they have advantage. But you need to work to make an impact in Latin America, you have to bring a good product and sell it good to the people.
Right.
So they know that Japan is present in Latin America.
Right.
And you have to study and work where you can have more impact in Latin America. So the people in Latin America will remember very much Japan as a key player in the world. That's what we need from Japan.
Right.
Maybe study a little bit more where I can have a biggest impact in Latin America, and how can we work with Latin American countries.
Right.
So there are opportunities there, and we have critical minerals. Peru is a country that produces many.
In sort of the image, and this is from your personal experience, or sort of in Peru. What is the image of Japan? Is Japan cool? Is Japan where the future is, or is the future in China? What is the reputation of Japan? And you don't have to be diplomatic.
No. Mr. Noguchi will complain, but they have a good image.
Right.
We, the Peruvians, think that Japanese, they work hard.
Right.
They are disciplined. And the Peruvians, we can't complement that discipline, that hard work with imagination to solve many problems. That's why we can work together with that.
Right. It is very interesting. I mean, I always, I know nothing about Latin America, but this when you look at Latin American literature, including, of course, Peruvian, right? This sort of magical realism and some of the work that Japanese contemporary literature sort of does. There's a dream sphere and a nostalgia that sort of has great similarities, at least in my personal opinion here. But I'd like to open up the floor for any questions that you may have, to the ambassador. If there's anybody, any question, and Johnny, there you go. Thank you.
Buenos dias. I'm Johnny. I do a small art film. My family was in trading in Asia Pacific for a long time, China, Japan, and South America. We used to keep a house in Barranco, al Puente de Suspiro.
Good.
And historically, the relationship between Chile and Peru has not been good. I assume now the relationship is much better. And in view of Trump's isolationist policies, is there any more effort in the region like Ecuador, especially on the West Coast, like Ecuador, Peru, and Chile, to create some unique economic forum together and work with Asia without the United States? And is there any effort to open up the Puerto Chanchay, the port of Chanchay, to the region, to let Chile, Ecuador, other West Coast countries use the facilities of the port, and sort of this unifying West Coast South America to improve economic relationships and trade with Asia?
Okay, thank you, Johnny, for your question. Between Peru and Chile, I think we left a long time ago these problems that we used to have. And now there are very much investments from Chile and Peru. So we're working very much together. And we are working in different integration mechanisms that we have in Latin America. And I think one of the most important is the Pacific Alliance that President Garcia promoted during his second period to work towards this region. So he decided to work with Chile. He invited many countries, but Chile, Peru, Colombia, and Mexico, we decided to work together to make an approach to this region. Because alone, one country alone cannot come and have an impact over here. Because when we talk about business over here, they ask you, let's say, we're talking about grape. They ask you 100 tons of grape, and let's say Peru doesn't produce. But if you work with other countries, with Chile and some other countries, we can provide that. So this mechanism, the Pacific Alliance, is the answer for dealing with this area.
Right.
But right now is like a standby, but it's still there. We're still more by ideological problems right now that we have in the region. But the Pacific Alliance is the answer to deal with this region, with China, with Japan, Korea, and all these countries.
But Johnny, you raised the important point, and of course, look, everything is in flux. We're only just beginning to try and redefine. It's like a potential shock that's bigger than the Berlin Wall coming down and China entering the global economy in 1989, 1990, and then who the hell knows. But, you either fragment or you consolidate. And if you fragment, then, it's chaos. It becomes multimodal and ultimately unmanageable. But if you unite and pull together, it actually gets interesting. And, there's no question that America, in a very selfish term, benefits from the fragmentation. America is at risk, right? Or the dominance of America is at risk if there is unification. And whether that's in Europe, right, or whether that is in Southeast Asia, or whether that is in Latin America. I mean, you may have seen over the weekend here in this region, you've had over the last 2 months, significant pickup in high-level meetings between the People's Republic of China, Japan, and South Korea. And, just from a economic perspective. So fine, you're doing these tariff things, right? On my own, a retaliatory tariff for any of these countries is relatively meaningless for America. If you do have a unified approach, it actually gets very interesting. Not interesting from its the overall impact on the global economy is terrifying, but from a chikara kanke, from a balance of power perspective, this is where it gets very, very interesting. And Latin America, right, again, all this great potential, but not unified, not a homogeneous market. As a result of that, if you're a Japanese company and your choice is between India strategy or Latin America strategy, there's no question that the boardroom is going to go for the India strategy because it's a homogeneous, it's a difficult market, it's an emerging market, blah, 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 but at least it's a homogeneous, unified market. While with Latin America, I got to deal with every different little regulatory regime to get my permits, et cetera, et cetera. So this unification, right, I think is ultimately going to be a big, big challenge, right?
It's a lot of things to do and to work.
That's okay because, even in the world of football, I think, a unified Latin American team may have a chance of beating the German team. While, of course, unfortunately, when each country plays on its own, the Germans always lose. But that's... Any additional questions or comments? Hello, please, yes.
Hi, good morning. I'm Mario. I'm Peruvian as well, so happy to have this opportunity to meet the ambassador. As a Peruvian, I think one of the biggest assets that we have is our culture, the cuisine, as you said. And yet I believe the awareness of Peruvian culture is still relatively underdeveloped outside. There are, maybe more in the United States, but not so much here yet in Japan. And I know of countries like Thailand, for example, that have actively invested in enabling startup restaurateurs to start up restaurants outside of Thailand with loans, with a series of financial incentives. So I was wondering if that's something that Peru is considering, enabling an expansion of Peruvian cuisine and culture through financially supporting, whether it's restaurants or art, that would have ultimately more people in Japan becoming more aware of Peru and then perhaps being more open to bilateral trade in the future.
I think the Peruvian cuisine is recently movement. Let's say we've been having always the food, but the way that we present, the way that we are selling our food now is more important. Now, in different part of the world, we are establishing new restaurants. Even in here, we have a 2-star Michelin Mass, which is a very good restaurant. And there are many other good restaurants over here in Tokyo. So what we can do as an embassy, we are, of course, always try to promote our food in dinners and events in which we can promote our food. And of course, we are trying to bring products also from Peru because it's a necessity to work with our products. So we need more open markets wherever we work, in different parts of the world. And of course, our cultural area and the food, we need more investment from the government. And we are trying to do the job, but the necessities also in our country is so much we can do. But of course, Mexico has more aggressive form, but we are working on it. I think, and also the food will sell itself. I think the people will go to restaurants.
I think this is you need to start by having a pisco sour and little cocktail hour for Asia Society Tokyo members at the Peruvian embassy.
Yeah,
I mean, we could spread the word.
Yeah. We can start by that.
We could be your beta testing group. Right? And
yeah.
we were very happy to bring along esteemed members from the Ministry of Finance.
We should start by that. Yeah. That's a good way to start the promotion.
No, it's an open offer. I'm right, Sawako. I mean, we can make this happen. And anybody here on the in the global universe, I'm sure that they would come not just for sakura, but they would come for pisco sour in the Peruvian embassy.
We can arrange something.
Right.
Something about it.
This is, and I remember the dessert was also pretty good. Yeah. Or maybe I was too drunk at the time.
No. It's the unique products that you find in Peru that make the difference. Yeah. There are some products that you don't find it here, you don't find it any other place in the world.
Right.
So that's why biodiversity that we have in Peru, the different products, unique products that we have, are important in our dishes and our food.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm Takako Hikotani. I'm a senior fellow with Asia Society Policy Institute, and I'm also a professor at the University of Tokyo starting in April. I just noticed that we have, at the University of Tokyo, we have partner universities in Brazil, Chile, and Mexico, but not in Peru. So maybe that's one starting point, that it would be nice to have an exchange. But on the more academic side, you mentioned the shift in the 80s in Japan from Latin America, the attention to Southeast Asia. I think the other shift that I'd be seeing is a definition of Asia Pacific. Used to include, or we used to think, the Pacific Basin. But last year, I was teaching at a different university, and I mentioned that APEC is taking place in Peru. And one of the students said, why is it happening in Peru? Because I think there's a perception shift. There's the Asia Pacific, and then it was Indo-Pacific, and people tended to shift sort of towards the west and kind of forget that Pacific actually included Latin America. And I think that's a really unfortunate thing, that it could be both ways, but I think people tend to think in a more narrow sense of Asia Pacific because of the name sort of have, the new term is Indo-Pacific. So my question to you is, how much of your students in Peru, do they think of themselves as members of the Pacific Basin? Do they think of themselves somewhat differently from other parts of Latin America, which is not obviously a Pacific country? And is there any attention to teaching classes on Pacific region or something about that I think is staying in Peru? Because I do think it's unfortunate in Japan that that part of the Pacific seems to have less attention these days because of the shift to the rest of Asia, as you mentioned. So what is it like in Peru? Do they feel differently about Asia than other parts of Latin America?
We have a huge coast of more than 2,000 kilometers, and so we are in front of the Pacific. So our relations with the ocean and the Pacific Ocean is very close. With the food, the fish play an important source of proteins for the Peruvians, and so and the Pacific, the ocean is in. We see it as something very close to us, and the region. Let's say we see the region as something that we need to work. Of course, we need sometimes to make more awareness of the importance of this area, but also it has to come from countries like Japan. It has to look back. We can work in this area. There are opportunities. There are many opportunities to work, and I think it's both ways. We have to make more awareness between this area and us in general in Latin America countries. But the difference is that we are willing to work with this area. We know that this is an important area that present many opportunities to increase the trade, to increase the exchange of people. So there are opportunities to work over here.
Thank you. Ambassador, thank you for your talks. And I know that you mentioned food a lot this morning. And so my company, as I mentioned to you earlier, actually, we import food from Peru, frozen avocados, jalapenos, and so on. One of our issues is on the quality control of the food that we import, because we feel there's more potential to import more, but we've always had some issues with the manufacturers because the companies here, we do mainly B2B, have very, very strict standards on how it should be. And for us, it'd be very helpful if the embassy here would be able to kind of get some understanding of the manufacturers in Peru as to the standards that are required in Japan, because as you said, there's a lot of agricultural products that can increase in Japan. So my point is that I agree with you, there's a potential, but there is a difference in terms of the standards that are required in Japan, and so I think that has to be looked at to increase the trade. Yeah.
I think it's important what you mentioned, because it's an area in which Japan can help us, with making higher standards in Peru, so we can meet the standards of Japan.
Yes. Anyway, on maybe some other time, I can talk to you about some of the details that we face with in terms of expanding our business with Peru. But I think there's great potential. I think there's a difference in perception in terms of what the standards are. Yeah.
We will visit you and we can talk about it.
Thank you.
Because there are opportunities, I think. Yes, yes, yes.
And we've got one question from...
Yes, we have a question from the online audience. We have a question from Hendrik Gordenker, who is a founding member here at Asia Society Japan. The question is, are there specific opportunities in the critical mineral space in Peru that you think Japan should pay attention to?
Lithium. There are opportunities in lithium, copper, of course. And I think I will mention those two that Japan should pay more attention. Now they are investing more in copper in Chile, but the opportunities are also, I think Chile is becoming more mature market in minerals, so they have to start looking to some other places, and I think Peru can provide that materials.
There's 5 times more lithium in Peru than in Greenland. But we shall not tell this to President Trump. Ambassador, it's been fascinating, and thank you so much, that you came out. It's been a joy. I wish we could step out into the garden because it's in full bloom, but we can only do that if we all wear some Peruvian, some warm jackets. But thank you very much, and I want to thank everybody for coming out on. I'm really excited to have Tobias here. Tobias almost needs no introduction. He's been involved in Japanese politics, for almost 2 decades now. Worked as an aide to a legislator, is the biographer of Abe Shinzo. Also has a little company that consults and writes on Japanese politics, on what's going on. And, Japanese politics, sort of this bastion of stability, this very calm setting here. In terms of format, want to give Tobias the stage for about 20-25 minutes. Then we have a little bit of a fireside chat, and then we open it up to questions from the audience. So without further ado, Tobias, you've got the stage.
Thank you, Jesper. Really pleasure being here. A lot of familiar faces around the room, and it's really good to see those faces and good to see friends here. And I know this is such a great institution to be at, so really I'm grateful for the opportunity. When I gave the title, or a tentative title for this talk, Japan's Democracy in an Era of Transition, I don't know if I even appreciated the extent to which we would feel that transition and the scale of that. And so unlike, I guess, a customary talk where you might have 3 points, I actually want to point to 5 ways in which I think we can see Japan's democracy in transition and kind of talk through those. And I think the importance of the word being in transition is that this is clearly, this is a stage of moving from one thing to another, but we don't know the outcome yet. I don't think we can really say, what Japan's democracy is going to look like. It's even hard to say in, say, 6 months' time, let alone in several years' time, that this really is in the process of becoming a system that maybe looks different. The party system may end up looking different. The government is already starting to work differently. The diet is starting to work differently. How voters vote is changing, I think, quite dramatically. Last year, I think, was a very important indicator of that. And so I'm going to kind of walk through all of the ways in which I see Japan's democracy really having already moved away from maybe what we might call the 2012 system, the system that really emerged when Abe returned in 2012, and in many different ways now it is moving to something different. So I think the first point of transition is that we have moved from a strong LDP, a strong, fairly united LDP, to, I think, arguably a weak, divided, and unsure of how it's governed LDP. So, Abe comes back. He, is the de facto leader of the party's largest faction, is able to pretty much line up everyone behind him. He excels at marginalizing his adversaries or co-opting them, as the current prime minister knows very well. And that there was, I think you could say from that point on, there was a unity of purpose. That the party had a program. It was Abenomics, it was the Abe show, and the party was united behind him, and he gave the party victory. And that worked. Nothing succeeds like success. And Abe won election after election after election, and it just kept the ship together. And even when he ran into trouble, even when you had corruption scandals from 2017 onward, none of it really managed to shake the unity of the party. And what we have seen subsequently is step by step that unity has faltered. Held together somewhat for Suga's term, but in the end it looked like Suga was really just serving out the remainder of Abe's term. Under Kishida, I think in some ways it worked, but it only worked, and this is I think this was the key point of transition, where you went from a prime minister who came from the party's largest faction to a prime minister who was dependent on the party's largest faction, and that dependencies created vulnerabilities and ultimately led to Kishida's decline. And so then in the end you end up with this very divisive LDP leadership election last year that really reveals the extent to which in the wake of Abe's tenure and then his death, that you have a lot of divisions in the party that had been contained about the direction the party should take on key policy questions, who should lead, who should have key positions of power. And Ishiba won a narrow victory, but it was not a resounding endorsement of his leadership. He has a very weak base in the party that I think he is trying to fix, but is not necessarily succeeding in doing. And so you have a situation where there's not a firm grip on the party, there's not unity of purpose, it's not exactly clear what the party is trying to achieve, and there's a number of stress points, and I think we might see them. I mean, we're going to see one, I think, in the coming weeks as the Diet takes up this question of separate surnames, where you have a lot of crankiness on the right wing of the party. You're going to see those stresses, and those stresses are going to continue. I don't know if it's going to, I don't think it's going to result in the party breaking, but it's a very different LDP than we saw 2012 to, say, 2022, 2023. So the second transition, and this is really a direct consequence of the weaker LDP, is that you went from a period where, I mean, the Abe government was really the culmination of several decades of reform to make Japan's government strong, to have a more top-down system, a prime minister who, really sits at the center of, a control panel with lots of different levers to pull, and the ability to really set the direction for policy and say, this is the direction we're going, and follow. And so having a unified party was part of that, but then having the levers in the prime minister's office, and actually under the Abe government, really expanding those controls, so that a cabinet personnel bureau, the National Security Council Secretariat, a number of other reforms of different scale, you had these tools now that the prime minister could use to govern. And I think what we're learning now is that even as those institutions remain in place, that if you have a prime minister who is politically weaker, who has a weaker base, the ability to use those tools is diminished. And so you have a prime minister. I mean, the number of conversations I've had now with people, lamenting the poor performance of the Ishiba Kante, that he doesn't have, Abe had this team around him that, several times a week was meeting and setting the direction of the government. Ishiba doesn't have his team. And so what you have in that